It was a rainy night. Dark clouds hung over the sky, and lightning frequently struck the sky. The hostel was located a little outside the city. An old government school building had been converted into a girls' hostel. The walls were cracked in places, the ceiling was covered in a thick layer of damp, and long corridors filled with old bulbs flickering. At night, the entire hostel seemed devoid of life. Only the whisper of the wind and the creak of the wooden doors could be heard. Anjali, who had recently moved into the hostel, was looking out the window. Raindrops were making a strange sound as they hit the glass. A slight fear filled her heart. A new city, a new hostel, and this eerie atmosphere. Just then the door opened. Neha, her new roommate, entered the room. She was carrying a small bag. "Oh, look, Anjali." She opened the bag and took out a strange doll. The doll's face was strange. Big black eyes, a wide smile, and old dirty clothes. Its hair was tangled, as if no one had combed it in years. "Music. I found this in the old market. They say it's very rare. Isn't it lovely?" She felt as if the doll's eyes were piercing her heart. "Neha, I don't like it at all," she said softly. Neha laughed and said, "You're so scared for no reason. It's just a toy." It was around 11:30 at night. The entire corridor of the hostel was silent. Old fans creaked softly here and there, and occasionally a door would move on its own. Anjali and Neha lay down in their room. Neha, laughing, put the doll in her cupboard and said, "Now look happy, I put it inside. Don't be afraid now." Anjali didn't reply. Her eyes were still fixed on the crack in the cupboard, from where she could see two black eyes peeking out. As soon as the lights were turned off, the entire room was plunged into darkness. The only sound was the pitter-patter of raindrops coming from the window and the faint hum of the fan. Anjali tried to close her eyes, but sleep eluded her. Suddenly the fan stopped. The room fell silent. Then a strange laughter echoed, very soft, as if a child was sitting in the dark. Anjali immediately opened her eyes and saw the cupboard door half open, and the same doll was sitting in the middle of the bed. Anjali shook Neha in alarm. Neha woke up and saw how it came out of the cupboard. Neha looked at her with sleepy eyes and laughed. "Are you crazy? You must have taken it out." "No, Neha, I didn't take it out. Came out on its own." Neha laughed and picked up the doll and put it back in the cupboard. But this time she didn't pay attention. The doll's head turned slightly and looked directly at Anjali. Anjali's throat went dry. She wanted to say something, but her voice got stuck in her throat. The night passed somehow. Music. Anjali opened the cupboard and examined the doll carefully. The doll's clothes were old, but they were covered with faint dark stains, like very old stains. And strange little marks were etched on the back of its neck, as if someone had deliberately scratched them with nails. She was now convinced. This doll was no ordinary one. Anjali and Neha were standing in the warden's office. Anjali explained everything. The doll moved on its own, emerging from the cupboard. The warden said in a stern voice, "It's all your imagination. This is a hostel. There's no witchcraft here. If you're scared, I'll remove this doll forever." She picked up the doll and took it to the old storeroom. The storeroom was in a remote corner of the hostel, rarely visited. Inside lay dust, broken chairs, torn mattresses, and cobwebs. The warden angrily threw the doll into an old wooden box and slammed the door shut. The locking sound echoed throughout the corridor. Neha left. She looked back towards the cupboard and whispered, "She'll come back." Anjali looked at her, startled. "What did you say?" Neha immediately laughed and changed the topic. "Nothing." Suddenly, a terrifying scream echoed throughout the hostel. The girls rushed out of their rooms. Silence and fear filled the corridors. Anjali and the others ran after the sound. Finally, they saw the warden lying on the ground. Her breathing had stopped. Her face was strangely stiff, and her eyes were completely white, as if someone had sucked her soul out. The girls were in a panic. No one could understand how this had suddenly happened. But Anjali's gaze went to a corner. The same doll was sitting on the windowsill near the wall. Her face looked more distorted than before, her smile wide, and her eyes fixed directly on Anjali. After that incident, the atmosphere in the hostel became even more terrifying. All the girls were scared, but Neha was strangely calm. She would often sit alone in her room and talk to the doll. Sometimes, in the middle of the night, Anjali would hear her soft voice, as if she were responding to someone. Slowly, Neha's face began to change. Dark circles formed under her eyes. Her smile became as strange and wide as the doll's. One night, Anjali saw Neha sitting in front of the cupboard. The doll was in her lap, and Neha's lips were motionless. Yet two voices echoed in the room. One Neha's and the other a small child's laughter. Anjali's blood froze. Now she was convinced. The doll had possessed Neha. Anjali was now completely devastated. Every night, Neha's actions became more frightening. Sometimes she would stare in the mirror for hours. Sometimes she would place the doll in the middle of the room at midnight. Suddenly, Anjali woke up. The light in the room turned on by itself. Neha was not in bed. Slowly, her gaze drifted to the center of the room, where Neha was standing. Her eyes had turned completely black, and she was holding the same doll. Neha said in a strange, broken voice, "Now this doll is mine and I am its." Anjali's whole body trembled. She started to run, but the door closed automatically from the inside. Light scratches appeared on the walls of the room, as if an invisible hand had clawed at the wall. A fan fell from the ceiling and hit the floor with a thud. The doll's eyes were shining, and her laughter echoed throughout the room. Anjali screamed, ran to the window and jumped out. But there was no ground outside. There was a deep darkness below. It seemed as if the world outside the hostel had disappeared. She turned back and saw that Neha was no longer the only one in the room. In every corner of the room stood several childlike figures, each holding a similar doll. Neha stood among them. Her face no longer looked human. She said softly, "It's too late now. Ajay, you are with us now." Suddenly, all the lights in the room went out. Only Anjali's screams were heard. In the morning, the other girls in the hostel found the room empty. Neither Neha nor Anjali. Only that doll sat smiling in the middle of the bed. It is said that after that night, that room in the hostel was always kept locked. But sometimes at midnight, a doll's laughter can still be heard and a shadow can be seen peeking through the window. Perhaps Anjali is still imprisoned there.